Hey there, and welcome to the Velo Frontend course. I'm Joshua, Developer Advocate, and I'm going to be showing you how to use the front end for Velo by Wix. So throughout this course, we're going to be doing a number of things, from creating static and dynamic event handlers, creating a simple hello world example, and even using our own Wix internal APIs like storage, window, and on top of that, we're going to be also learning how to use some of our tools like the release candidate and logging and monitoring. So you'll be able to combine all these skills together, and by the end, you'll be able to be a solid front-end developer with Velo by Wix. So before we get started, we have to turn on dev mode to enable Velo. So we'll just go here to the top of the screen, and we'll turn on dev mode. So dev mode gives us access to add our own JS code, connect to Wix internal tools, and our own APIs that we're going to be going over throughout this course. So we'll turn on dev mode. And you see that we got started without any setup. So I already have some code here, and you'll notice that I have some new things on the screen here from the code panel and even the Velo sidebar. So we're gonna start here with the code panel or the IDE. So the code panel has different tabs depending on the page that you're opened on. So right now we're on the Velo front-end page, and then we also have another tab here for the masterpage.js. Masterpage.js is a file that controls all of the pages on your site. So you can add code here to make different functions happen on every page. So for example, you have your headers and your footers. Maybe you have a search bar at the top of your header that you want to show up and operate the same way on every single page. You can do that. So back to the Velo frontend tab. It's pretty easy to navigate back and forth. We also have our code panel or our IDE. So our IDE has its own ESLinter inside of it. It's kind of similar to VS Code. And it also has autofill and autocorrect. So if I go here and I import a new API, you'll see that I get a list from this autofill here. So I can choose a lot of APIs from Wix Data, Wix CRM backend, Wix Animations, Wix Stores to work with that vertical, you name it. So if I type in Wix location, which is a front-end API that we'll be going over in this course, you'll see that it's here. But we also notice that I'm getting some errors as well. So that's one thing that our editor can do for us and lets us know if we have any duplicates or anything wrong with our code. So we'll just go here and delete Wix location since we already have it in our code. And we can even go here and right-click and format our code to make it look nicer. So as we select different elements on our page or on our editor, you'll notice that we have a new piece here to our code panel, and that is our properties panel. Our properties panel lets us manage all of our different elements on the page as we click them. So you'll see here I have our welcome message. That's the ID that I set it as, and I can always go here and edit our ID name. Below we have our default values. These default values are hidden and collapsed, and that just depends on the element that you have selected. All right. So our hidden and collapse, we can set these as default values so that when the page loads, it would automatically have done these actions. So we can even do this through programmatically with code as well, but you have your default values you can select here to boost things up. So below that, we have our event handlers, and our event handlers have all of our different static event handlers that you can add depending on the element that we've chosen. And this also depends on the data type as well. So if it's a text or if it's a button, there's going to be different event handlers for each type of data type. So now on to the Velo sidebar. The Velo sidebar has a lot of options, but primarily for the front end, we're going to focus on page code. Page code has a folder here called main pages, and this is where I can access all of my different pages that I have throughout my project. So as I click the different pages, you'll notice that in the code panel, the tab is changing. All right, so each page has its own way of adding code and controlling it. Below that, we also have an area here for Wix members. And if I added Wix stores or even bookings or events, it would add more front-end pages to my page code option here. And then on the bottom of that, we have our light boxes, which we're going to be going over throughout this course as well with Wix window and Wix location. And then last but not least, we have our masterpage.js, which we just talked about. So these are all the tools that you can get up and ready to go with your front-end development. You can also use the Velo tools here on the side to check out the release manager, secrets manager, monitoring, which we're going to be talking about a little bit more later on in the course. If you need any help, you can click here for Velo Help to check out our API reference, and then you can even look at our conversations in the forum as well. So to get started, we just have to talk about a few different things and some other exceptions. So when you're using Velo by Wix, you're not able to use HTML or CSS. This is just straight JavaScript. You also don't have DOM access, but you do have access to using our page elements and also our front-end APIs. So we're going to be going over a basic example that we've seen in many other programming languages to get started, and that's a hello world example. We're going to be doing this the Velo way. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, this is not going to be something that's very foreign to you, but showing it the Velo way and how we use our selectors is going to open up your eyes to a whole other world of development. So we already have dev mode enabled, and we have a bunch of elements on our page. So let's just get started by changing the text and showing you the difference between using HTML, CSS, and then maybe just JavaScript with Velo. So we'll go here, we'll bring up our IDE a bit, and you notice that I have some elements in the page. And I hover over this, it says welcome message. That's what I have it ID'd as. I changed it in the properties panel. So when I select it, the properties panel does appear, and I can see the ID and welcome message. Same goes for the other text on the bottom here. And what I want to do in this example, I'm going to change the value of this text to something different. So let's change welcome to something else. So since we have the ID, which is welcome message, we can use that and select the element and then use a different property. Since it's a text, we'll use the text property to then change it to a different word or a different string or text. So what we'll do now is in the onReady function, we'll just do $W, and we'll select welcome message. Next, we're going to use the text property, .text, and this text property, we can equal it to a string or another text. So we'll equal that in quotes to hello world. Awesome. So when we go to preview mode, we should see a change in this welcome message, and it won't say welcome to, it just say hello world. So preview, and we get a change of hello world. And the reason why we get this change already is because we have it inside of our onReady function, which we're going to talk about more in depth in the next lesson. But basically, we're presenting this code and it's already loading what we have changed in the functions before we get to the page. So we'll go back to the editor now, and we're going to add some more functionality to this page as well. So I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add a button so that when I click this button, it's going to make something else happen. So maybe change the text to something different once this button is clicked. Let's try that. So we'll go here to the add panel, and we have a list of different buttons here, but I like the way that this say hello button looks just because it's relevant. I'll drag it and drop it here, and I'm going to select it. So with the properties panel, I'm just going to select the button and change the name of the ID to hello button. Cool. So now that that's selected and that's hello button, I'm going to open up our code panel again. And say hello is a cool label or text to have, but I want to make this dynamic. And the reason why I would want to make this dynamic through code is because maybe there's some other function that I want to interact with that's going to change the text over time. Or maybe some API over the web that I want to populate this value as something different as the API is changing. So there's many instances, but it's mainly just so that we can customize the way that this button is working, rather than just working with the default menu and making things static. So we'll select this button, $W. We'll select the button and we'll say hello button. And buttons have a different way and a different property of changing the text, and we're going to use that with the .label property. So it says .label is sets and gets a label of a text button. And we can just equal that to a string as well. So equals to, let's say this button says, what's up? Or say what's up. Cool. So when I go to preview, I should see a change in what my button looks like. But that looks like there's a little bit too much text, so we'll go back and we'll change it to something shorter. We'll just go to what's up. So we have this button, but we want some type of action to happen. We change the labels, we change the text, but when I click this button, let's make it do something else. And we'll change it to a different message now. So instead of hello world or welcome to, we're gonna change this same welcome message to something else. So first what we're gonna do is we're going to select our button and then add an event handler. But we're gonna add this event handler dynamically with code. So we'll select the button once more, $W, hello button. Instead of changing the label, we're gonna add an event handler, and this is gonna be on click. So when we click the button, a certain event is going to be handled. So on click. So now what we're going to do is select the text element, and just keep in mind that you can select any type of element and add any type of functionality to it within this on-click function. It doesn't just have to be what I'm doing now. So in this on-click, we're going to change this text, this welcome message once more, to Earth is the best. So I'll select welcome message again. So $W. And we'll select welcome message. And we're going to use the text property once more. And we're going to change this string to Earth is the best. So now let's go over to preview mode and check this out. Preview, open it up. We can even bring down our developer console a bit. So you notice we have hello world. That's already changed. What's up is our button. But now let's see what happens when we click our button. This is going to handle our event that we just created. Change what's up. And now you see Earth is the best. So I could have moved this over design-wise or maybe add less text, but this is the great thing about preview mode. I can go in and out the editor, and then what I see is what I get. I can drag and drop and get back to my code really easily without having to go through HTML or CSS. In our last lesson, we went into a lot of detail about just getting the basics of Velo. So we had a basic hello world example where we just had our text appear and we clicked a button and we made some text change. So now we're going to go into more detail about $W and some more situations that you'll be getting into along the way. So let's get back to the editor and check this out. So I have a few different elements on my page already. And also in my IDE, you can see a few times that I've used $W. So I use $W to select different elements on my page. This is different from HTML and CSS because I don't have to use get element by ID or change anything with inner HTML. Everything I can change right here with JavaScript or with the editor and the menus that are available for you to use with Wix. So that helps pick up a lot of the speed and cuts the development time in half. So what I'm going to do now is use $W to interact with some more things on the page. So you notice here on line number 5, I have $W on ready. So this is an on ready function that actually starts to load and present certain elements on the page before our visitors are there. So our on ready function uses $W because the whole page acts as an element itself. So $W helps you select elements with your code. And in this example, we're going to use some things from our backend actually, which is going to kind of make things make a little bit more sense between this course and the backend course as well. And we're going to be using a Velo package just to use some more front-end helpers with our Wix Animations API. So this is going to help us jumpstart adding animations to our site. So let's go over here to code files real quick. It's the only time in this course where we're going to be doing this. And we already have a Velo package already here. And this is Wix Animations helper. So let's navigate over to the README, and we're going to learn a little bit more about this package and maybe about some other packages that are coming down the line as well that you can interact with your front end. So the Animations helper is going to be using the Wix Animations API, which is a front-end API, to add animations with JavaScript. In the README, it already gives me a breakdown of exactly how to use this tool, how to use the package, and then also I can start to add my own custom functionality to it as well. So the Velo packages are a great way for me to reuse code and get up and going anywhere. Either if it's this site, an existing page I had beforehand, or sites I have in the future that I'm creating. So let's scroll down because I think I want to make this Velo message text. I want this to zoom in and out anytime I hover my mouse over it. So this is when we get into event handlers as well, because with event handlers, you're able to use $W and then add some more functionality to it. So we have our welcome here. Let's go to our README once more for this package and we'll check it out. So I want to make this zoom. So there is a zoom function here that we're going to use. And you notice how this README actually really breaks down the code and tells me what I need to import and what I need to use. So I already have this imported, right? And I want to select an element. So it's saying here to zoom into text element on hover, we first need to stop the animation function from playing by default. So we're going to do that right here by using the zoom function. So the great thing about this README here is I can just get up and going without having to reinvent the wheel with Velo packages. And I'm just going to go and use the same code that's here. Now, what I'm going to do is add a static event handler for this purpose. I already have some here. And I'm going to actually delete them because the thing is about static event handlers is that they only are added for one instance at a time. And if I was to add this again, it really wouldn't work out. So it's the difference between static and dynamic event handlers. So I'm just going to add a on mouse in, enter. And we're going to use that same code. Let's format. And then I also want to add a mouse out. And I can always go here on my static event handlers and change the name out depending on what it is. But since I have the name of my ID and I already know what event I want to handle, it tells us the name first that we have as the ID and then what the event is. So we'll just click enter here. And now that we have both of these event handlers here, let's take care of these comments. Let's get them out the page. All right. So I'm going to actually use the same code as well, format. And the great thing about Velo packages, it already comes ready with everything you need to do without the same idea of the element you're selecting, because there's no way for them to know exactly what elements you have on the page. But this is a great starter code for you to get up and going. So we're here to welcome. And we can change this to welcome as well. So for the mouse in, I want the animation to play. And for the mouse out, I want the animation to reverse. So I'm pretty much zooming in and zooming out depending on where my mouse is. So we're going to use the text zoom timeline. And then we're going to use the play function. For the mouse out, we're going to select the text zoom timeline. And we're going to use the reverse function. So now when I click on preview mode, when I hover over this text, we should have it zoom. And then when I hover away, it's going to zoom out. But you can also change this with the Wix Animations API on your own. So definitely check out that documentation and you can learn how to really make this animation do exactly what you want in combination with the Velo package or just doing the code yourself. So when using Velo by Wix, there's two different types of event handlers that we can add. We have static event handlers and dynamic event handlers. So we're going to start with static event handlers here. So when we select a certain element on our editor, we're going to see event handlers appear on the properties panel. So when I click this text here for welcome message or even this other welcome text as well, you'll see that I have event handlers that are there for me. So even from the last lesson, we used the static event handler to make the text zoom in and out when we moused in and moused out. So when we hovered over the text, it would zoom in and zoom out, and those were static event handlers. So we specified which element needed that static event handler by the ID, which is given to us in the properties panel itself. So let's go back to this welcome message, and we're going to take a look at the different types of event handlers that are available. So text have different event handlers than, let's say, an input for a dropdown or even for input for text. You notice that there's nothing here for onChange because there's nothing that we're changing in the state of this element in terms of an event handler. So speaking of different elements that we have different event handlers, we're going to add a button now. So add a button, drag it to our page. And the first thing we're going to do with this button is make sure we rename it to something that is relative to what we are creating. So instead of button number 1, we're going to change this to a name that is going to relate to what we're doing. And we're going to name this spin text button. So my plan is to create a button that makes all the text on my screen spin at the same time. Right? So we're doing this all based off of the type of element this is. And I plan to continue to use the Wix Animations Helper Velo package that I just installed from the last lesson to continue to use it here. So we used static event handlers in that last lesson, but we're going to show you the difference between using both static and dynamic here. We're going to have them do the same exact thing, but we're going to write the code differently. So first starting with a static event handler, now that we renamed this element to spin text button, we're going to add an event handler, and I'm going to show you this workflow. So we're just going to click on click because this is the function that I want with this button. When I click this button, I want some type of action to happen afterwards. So we'll click this, and you'll notice that right here next to the onClick event handler, we have spin text button underscore click. So it's the name of the ID that I stored already for this element. And then I also have underscore click, which specifies the type of event handler that is actually happening. Now I can rename this anytime I want before I put it onto my IDE or my code panel. I can also delete and also recreate these event handlers as well. But I'm just going to go here and click enter or return. And it's going to create a event handler for me on my code panel. So you notice like I have this trash can here. I can remove this event. I can even add other events on top of each other as well. But we just want this simple on-click event handler. So let's get rid of these comments. I'm going to show you how easy it is just to add any type of action to this. So we want all of our text to spin when we click the button. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the spin function from the Velo Animations helper. And we're going to use that to make all of the text elements that fall underneath this element type to spin at the same time once the button is clicked. So these examples are simple, but you use these to open up your mind into the creativity of what is possible with Velo by Wix. So we're just going to use spin very simply, and then we're going to specify the type of element that we want to spin once this button is clicked. So I want all of the text elements to spin at the same time. And if you've seen our backend course where we actually use this Velo package as well, you'll notice that we did the same thing for spinning a vector image as well. But here we're going to be showing you the difference between dynamic and static events on the front end. So we're going to choose the type of text. And I could just get up and going with this Velo package, really easy. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just statically change the name of this button. And I'm just going to have it say spin, just so I know the action. I could even add a function that after I click this button, using a promise that's going to be returned, that I want this label to change once the button is clicked. So you can do a whole bunch of different things. Let's go here to preview. And I'm going to click spin. And look at that. Every text element on my page is spinning at the same time. Now, this is a static event, and you saw that it was pretty easy to get this going. And I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to do it with a dynamic event. And I'm going to tell you the difference between the both. But before we get started into the dynamic events, we have to make sure that we don't override anything that's going on, right? Or cancel anything out. So you can't have dynamic events and static events happening at the same time. So just for best practice, what you should do is go back to the button, delete this onClick event handler. And for this next example, I don't need this code, so I'll get rid of this as well. But I'm going to keep the ID of the button the same. And we're going to use this ID and $W, select the button, and add an onClick function dynamically through code. So I can use functional programming, so where I take the function outside of the onReady and then invoke it back into it, or I could just create the function right inside the onReady. So just for this purpose, we're going to create this function right here in the onReady. And we're going to on-click add this event handler dynamically to this spin button. So we're going to select this spin text button with $W. And we're going to name it spin text button. And for spin text button, we got to think about what type of event we want to have happen here. So I'm just going to mimic what we just did with that static event handler. And I'm going to use a dynamic event handler here with on-click. The reason why I would want to use a dynamic event handler here is because there's going to be so many other changes that I probably would want to happen within my site when I do click this button. And maybe that I have some other custom functionality to happen as well. It makes it a little bit easier to do that when I'm coding, especially if I have some third-party services that I have installed here. With a static event handler, it kind of locks me in the box a bit. So this course is going to be focusing a lot more towards dynamic event handlers, but static event handlers are very useful though. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here and add our on-click function. So within this, I'm just going to call spin. Within the same scope, I'm going to use this function. And within spin, let's just choose the text elements. And I encourage you to look through the README of this Velo package as well, because it definitely details how you could select different elements individually. And you can see that from some of our previous lessons in this course as well. So you have spin text, and we're going to go to preview. So now let's spin it, and there you go. And even from the last animation that we created with the zoom from the last lesson, we can still use those things in sync with each other. Right here, as I hover over and I hover out, it's zooming in and out of this Velo word that's going in a circle. So there's a lot of ways that you can use the timeline to create unique experiences on the front end with JavaScript. So there's no need for HTML or CSS here. This was just straight JavaScript and Velo APIs that are built in. So although we don't have DOM access here for the front end, there's plenty of front end APIs for you to choose from. So in this lesson, we're going to dive in and learn about Wix location specifically. Now, Wix location is an API that allows you to get information about your URL and even helps you navigate to new URLs across the web and even on your own website. So what we're going to do first, we're going to use a very simple example using Wix location 2 to navigate to a new page. So let's navigate to the wix.com/Velo page so we can go right there and learn all the information we need to know about Velo. So before we get started, we have to make sure that we have Wix location imported at the top of our front end page here. So we'll import Wix location right at the top. Now, to navigate, I'm going to need something to, initiate this action. So let's drag in an element like a button. So I'll minimize my IDE. I'm going to go to the add panel now. And let's go look for a button. And we'll drag or drop our button right here. Now, let's change out this button ID. I'm going to change this ID to Velo Nav Button. Okay. So now that it's changed to Velo Nav Button, I'm going to use $W to select this button and then also add some type of on-click function to it so that when I click the button, we're going to use Wix location to navigate to a new page. Bring up my IDE some more. I could even change out the name of this button programmatically by just selecting the Velo Nav button as well, just so we can see that change when the page loads because we're storing it here in our onReady function. So Velo Nav button, I'm going to change the label and have that label equal to go to Velo. Let's make this button a little bit bigger. And we're going to move it right here. So now the button should say go to Velo, it should fit. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to add an on-click function. I'm going to do this dynamically, and we're going to do it right here inside the onReady function. If you want to use functional programming, bring it out and invoke the function back in your onReady, you can do that as well. But just for this purpose, we're going to do it right in the onReady function. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to select this button and then also use onClick. And then onClick, we're going to use Wix location. So let's select our button. So $W, Velo nav button. When you click the button, I want to navigate to a new page. And that new page is going to be wix.com/Velo. So now Wix location, right here in our autofill, Wix location's here, and we're gonna use the .to function. Wix location 2 directs the browser to navigate to a specified URL. So it's gonna be looking for a string. It needs to be string format, and it also needs to be in HTTP format. So you can't just type www.wix.com/Velo. We have to use HTTP. So we'll do http://wix.com/Velo. And you notice underneath, I'm starting to get this underline here. So that to me is verifying that this string that I put in for this URL is actually a URL. So if I just did www.wix.com/Velo, it would come up as an unidentified format. So we need to keep it in HTTP. So now that my Wix location is here, ready to go, I have my on click for my nav button, Wix location's inside of it, it's on my on ready function. My button label is going to change. We have to go check this out. But something different about Wix location. Wix location operates in a published version of your site, right? We try to keep you within the editor and make sure everything is running smoothly. So we're going to check out our published version of the site. So what we're going to do, first we're going to save. We're saved, and now let's publish our site. Cool. Site's published, and we're going to go view our site right now. And now when we press this button, we should be able to navigate to wix.com/Velo. So let's go to Velo, and there we go. So now we're on wix.com/Velo, and we use Wix location 2 to navigate to this page. So now that we've navigated to wix.com/Velo with the Wix location 2 function, we're going to talk about the Wix query function with Wix location. So querying was going to help you navigate to a new page and then also get results based on what you typed in your query. So let's say you had a database full of planets and you wanted to get a result on another page from a search, and it's just going to show all the planets that are gas giants, right? So using query is going to help you query through this collection, and you can even combine it with Wix data to filter the collection and give you the results you're looking for. So for this lesson, I'm just going to show you how to structure this, and you can customize this functionality any way that you like. First, what I want to do, I'm going to move this button over here to the side, and I'm actually going to add another input. We're still going to use the same button because there's no need to continue to reinvent it. We're done with that example. And we're going to drag this input right here. And I'll even design it a little bit, change up the colors, make it more readable. And we're going to make this white. We're going to turn the text to white as well. And even the placeholder color. Okay. So I think that should be good enough for right now. We can even go in here and edit our placeholder real quick, and we can have this say search. All right. And our button over here can also say, we'll go here to the bottom and we'll change this programmatically since I was showing you the same example before. And this button is going to say submit. Cool. So let's take away this on-click function because we don't need it just yet. And you know what? This time around, I'm going to use a static event handler. So let's get rid of that function. I'm going to format our code again. And let's click this button and add an on-click from the properties panel. So return. Let's get rid of our comments. So now that we finished that, we also have dragged in our input. We have a button there. And what we're going to do inside of this static event handler, we're going to capture the value of what's being typed inside of this input box. And then we're going to also use Wix location and the query function as well to then help us navigate to a new page and even query and add to our URL. So what we're going to do now is we're going to select our input here. It's just named input 1. So let's just change this to search input, right? Just so we can work with it and have a name that we can recognize. $W again, so $dub. And we're going to change search input, and we're going to get the value. Now, I want to be able to use a search input, so let's make this into a variable. So let search input equal to what we have selected here. Now, I'm going to use that very same search input variable that I just created, and I'm going to create a conditional. So we're going to say if search input, then we're going to use Wix location.to, and we're going to navigate to a page that is already part of our project here. Right, so we're not going anywhere external. We're going to navigate to one of our pages. So in quotes, / let's see if we can navigate to the home page and change up our URL, right? So we're going to do home, and you have to make sure when you're using your own pages that this is in lowercase, right? So it's something to keep in mind. And then on top of that, we need to have a certain query that we have in question here. So we have question mark, and we're going to use query equals, and we're going to concatenate this query, and we're going to use our search input, right? So we're going to navigate to the home page. We have a query, and the query is going to be based off of what we have in the search input, right? So let's save our page. Cool. And we can publish. And let's view our published website now. So this should bring us to the home page. And then when we look at the home page's URL, we should have whatever we typed in our search input. So let's view our site. And I'm also going to go here and open up my toolbar. So let's view our site. We're going to type in Mars and pay attention to our URL, submit. And notice how we just went to another homepage here. It looks the same, but the URL is different. We have query equals Mars, right? So this is a powerful tool because if I did have a database on here or a repeater or that's connected to a data set, I can use these same query parameters to then filter my database and filter my data set that's going to show different results on the page. Now let's just say I wanted to show all of the gas giants, right? I can use Wix dataset and the Wix data filter method to then filter through that dataset and look for anything that contains gas giant if I have that as a field in my database. So now we know how to use Wix location 2, even get some information about our URL with query. You can take this even further and you can check out our API reference and look at some of the other examples we have there to use Wix location. There's even functionality to do some things with phone numbers and emails. So look at our API reference. There might be something there that interests you. So we might not have DOM access, but there's plenty of front-end APIs that you can use, and you can manipulate a lot of things that are happening on your page, right? So we already have a lot of these things built in, and I'm gonna show you how to work with Wix Window in this lesson. So I already have Wix Window imported at the top of my code already. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dynamic event handler, and I'm going to be passing data from this page, from this form that I have. So if I just minimize my screen here, and I see I have add name, add planet, submit. The data that I'm going to be collecting from this small form, I'm going to be sending it to a lightbox using Wix Window. So first, let me show you my lightbox and how I want it to work. So I have this one lightbox that I created. I added it from the add panel, and it says, welcome, name, get your spacesuit on, and let's take off. And the planet name. So right here, planet name is just a placeholder. So I have planet name, planet object, that's what I have identified it as. And then I also have name, which is name object. So the whole purpose of that form is to pass the name that I'm collecting from the form and the planet name, and I'm going to be sending it to this lightbox so that when I submit, the lightbox pops up and lets me know, hey, Joshua, you're from planet Earth, get your spacesuit on and let's take off. So there's a number of reasons that you could be using this type of technique. It could be for a store when you're letting a customer know that they purchased something and you're thanking them and maybe even dropping a promo code there, right? So there's a lot of the ways that you could be working with passing objects to your lightbox. So let's go back to our page with the form. And let's begin by creating a dynamic event handler with that submit button. So you have a submit button here. We have already ID'd it. And this one is called submit button. There's no event handlers here that are already taken from the static event handlers menu, but I'm going to be creating a dynamic event handler now. So let's select using $W the submit button. So $W, and we're going to be choosing our submit button, and then an onClick function. And with this onClick function, we're also going to be looking for an object to be created. So first, let's create this object and call it data obj, just for short. And inside this object, we're going to be placing a key value pair for our submission. So we need a key for our name, and then a value, then we need a key for our planet name, and then a value for that as well, right? So when we click it, we're going to be getting those values. And then on top of that, we're also, once this button is clicked, we want the Wix window to pop up, but then we also want to be sending the data. So follow along, and I'm going to be showing you exactly how to do that. So we have data object, and within this data object, I'm going to create a key for the name, and I'm going to have this name equal the value of what's inside this input, right? So whatever is typed inside of this input when the user's on this page and typing it in is considered the value. So what I'll do now is I'm going to select this input box and then use the value property in order to capture that value that I'm typing in, or the user, right? So this is all dynamic. I'm going to be passing in new data all the time, depending on who's been visiting the page. So I have the name, and I'm going to select the name input here. So $W, name input, and then I'm going to be using the value property. Awesome. And let's do the same thing for planets. So I can just go here, copy, paste on a new line. Let's swap out the names to planet. And I'm going to be using the planet input. But actually, let me go here and erase it all, just so it doesn't override it. Planet input. Cool. And I'm getting an error here, and that's just because in this object, I didn't put a comma here to separate the concerns of what these objects actually are. And now in the last section of this, I'm going to be using the Wix window API to open the lightbox, right? So Wix window, and we have a function called open lightbox. So when you have open lightbox, you have to look for the name of the lightbox and any data that you want to pass by. Those are the arguments that we're going to be using here. So the name of the lightbox that I have is called pop-up. You can name it whatever you like, but you have to make sure that this lightbox is exactly named the way that you have it, the way you're going to put it in your code, right? It's case sensitive. So we're going to use pop-up, and we're going to have this as a string because it's going to be accepting a text. It says it right there on the autofill, and it says it right here. So we're going to put it in quotes, and the name of our lightbox is called pop-up. So pop-up. And we want to be able to pass a data object. So we just created an object, and what we're going to do is just simply type in data obj because that's what we named the object. So it's data object, but data obj for short. So we have data obj. Cool. So that step's done. And let's go and navigate to the lightbox. So now we have the Wix window is going to open up once we click the button, and then we're going to be opening the pop-up lightbox and then pass the data through. But how do we get the data through? Let's find out when we go and open up this lightbox now. So right over to the lightbox, we have pop-up, and remember I have my welcome, I have my name, the planet name, and I only really want to be working with two dynamic elements here that I want to change here and there. So welcome can stay static. I just want that to stay there. There's no code or any event handlers attached to it. Same with this sentence about get your spacesuit on and let's take off. And even just this planet text, I only want to be manipulating the name and the planet name. That's it. So to get that up and going, we have to also create a data object that's going to be getting the context of what is coming from that form onto this page of the lightbox. So that's why we called the pop-up lightbox name inside of the last page and then also used our data object that we passed through. So we're going to be utilizing that right now. So what we have to do is create a new variable for the data object. And we'll have that equal to wixWindow.lightbox.getContext, so we can grab all of the content that we are passing over from the form over to this lightbox. So let's start with wixWindow.lightbox.getContext. Okay. So now that we've got the data, we want to swap it out now. So this is a static value. This is also a static value right now, but let's change it with this dynamic data passing through. So first things first, let's use $W again to select the name input, but then we're going to replace that text using the text property and replace it with the data object .name that's coming through from that form, right? So what I'm going to do now is $W, and then we're going to select the name object. So now we have name object. We want to be able to change the text of what is presented on the page. Okay, that's fine. So we're going to do text, and we're going to have that equal to the name object from the data that's being passed by. So let's just use data object. Cool. .name. Simple. So we can do the same thing for the planet info as well that we're getting passed over. And let's just change this out for the planet object .text, and we're going to change this to the planet. Okay, so that's pretty simple right now to get started. So what we're going to do, we're going to navigate back to our Hello Velo page. And remember, we started with these forms. We have a button. We're going to submit this form, and using the Wix window open lightbox function, we opened up the pop-up lightbox and we passed the data from this form all the way to our lightbox. So let's go and submit my name, the planet I'm from, and let's just see what this lightbox is going to say once we submit. So we'll preview. I'm going to type in my name, Joshua, and the planet I'm from is Earth. Let's submit, and our lightbox should open up. And there we go. It says, welcome Joshua, get your spacesuit on and let's take off. The planet I'm from is Earth. So you can use this in a number of different scenarios. Like I mentioned before, you can use this for a store checkout. I think it's a great way to use this. You could use this for maybe even concert tickets or concert goers. You can create a function that randomly gives out a promo code every now and then to maybe 50% of your users that can see your site from the release manager. So you can get very creative with this. Don't just stay in the box of what the example I showed you. That's the power of some of these front-end APIs. So yeah, we don't have DOM access, but you can still use this to utilize and also enhance your site way more than you could before Velo. So you see on the screen now, I have a lightbox that's here with some static data, and it's just saying first time in space, no need to freak out. Keep your helmet on and enjoy the promo code for 30% off. Then I have a promo code sitting there at the bottom. And currently this promo code is just static data, right? It's nothing dynamic, but you could definitely add some dynamic functionality to it. So use what you learned from the last lesson to help you with something like that. And of course, there's plenty of documentation and examples that you can learn from as well. But for this demo purpose, we just want to work with Wix storage, and we want to be able to bring up this lightbox for the very first time our visitor is coming to our site. What we need to do now is go to our masterpage.js. Masterpage.js is going to be our global code, right? So it's going to be working through our entire site. So from bringing up windows for the very first time, working with any functions within your header or within your footer, this is the code space that you're going to be manipulating. So we're going to navigate over to masterpage.js, and let's get started. So right here at the bottom on the Velo sidebar, we already have some APIs imported that I had here beforehand. So I have import session from Wix storage. So we're going to be looking for that session data, right? The session data is the data of that current session that you're in the browser, right? And we're going to be looking to see if this visitor has been to the site for the very first time with some conditional logic. I also have imported the Wix window API. The Wix window API is going to be able to help us open up the lightbox when that visitor comes to the very first time. So let's get started by adding some conditional logic. So we'll start with an if statement. If the session is not If it's not the session, we're going to get the item. And we're going to be looking for the item for the very first time. So let's put some text here that says, for the first time. All right, so if it's not for the first time, let's also add some more functionality to this statement here. And we're going to be opening the Lightbox. So if you haven't visited, if you haven't had a session that's here for the very first time, let's open the Lightbox. So let's use Wix window dot open Lightbox. And we're going to put the name of our Lightbox. And remember from the last lesson, the Lightbox name has to be exactly what you have typed on the Velo sidebar that you can see here. All right. So my Lightbox is named first time. Let's put this in a string because that's the data type that it's accepting. And we're going to type in the name exactly the way that we have it. So first time. And on top of that, I'm going to continue to use session from Wix storage. So let's use session. And we're going to set the item. And we're going to use the string for the first time again. And then we're also going to configure it with the word yes. Cool. So let's format our code, make it look a lot nicer. And let's go over this one more time. We've imported the session function from Wix storage. Also imported Wix window so we can open our Lightbox when we're checking to see if the user has been on the site for the very first time using conditional logic and working with the session function from Wix storage. And then once we check to see if the visitor's session data has been there and approved for saying that they've been there for the first time, we'll bring up this Lightbox, giving them a promo code for the very first time. So what we have to do now, we're going to save our site and we're going to publish it and we're going to check it out on the web, published already. So let's go over here to save. We're done and we're going to publish this now. And now let's go and view our site. And when we get there for the very first time, we should be getting this Lightbox telling us that we have been awarded a promo code. So let's view our site and take a look at what this looks like here. There you go. First time in space, no need to freak out. Keep your helmet on and enjoy the promo code for 30% off. Then I have my promo code sitting right there. And as I mentioned before, you can add so much more custom functionality to this Lightbox popping up for the first time. We learned about passing data objects from one front-end form to the Lightbox. You can also use an API to then have some other interactions come here, you name it, right? So you can get creative, but I think this is a good start for you to be working with Wix storage and session data as well. So it goes above and beyond this. So check out our API reference from the Velo help tools on the side, and you can check out how to use the Wix storage API even more. So we have a lot of front-end APIs that you can work with. Outside of these, you also have APIs you could work with the verticals like Wix stores, Wix events, and bookings as well. Those have a lot of front-end tools that you can work with. But I think the most important ones that you're going to be working with in the front end, outside of the vertical space, are storage, location, and also Wix window. First, we're going to start with the developer console. So the developer console is a place that you can go and test out your code and check to see any responses that you're getting. So you can check to see if something's undefined, you can check to see any errors, and you can even test out your code with console log. Right? So there's a few things to note about the developer console. So if you're looking for, data that is stored in your database that might be in sandbox version, you are not going to see it there, right? You're not going to get any responses there. You're going to have it in a published version in order to see this. Now, what you're going to have to do next is create some type of test. So we're going to go within our onReady function now and just create a simple console log just so we can get a response inside of the developer console. So we're going to type in our onReady function, console log, and we're going to type in hello Velo, just so we can have this message respond. So when we open up our developer console, we should see hello Velo right there. So save, done, and we're going to go to preview mode. Now it's opened up, and we see here it says hello Velo. All right, it's even giving us the origin, the page that we're on, and where it's coming from. So that's how we can test out different things. And if we're getting any error in our code, if a function's not working, we'll be able to see the response here inside of our developer console. Now, that's just one tool. Let's look at some more tools that go above just working inside of the code panel and on the Velo sidebar. Some of these tools are going to help you as a developer if you go right here to Velo Tools. So Velo Tools has a number of production tools that you can work with. First off, we can start with the Release Manager. Now, the Release Manager is a tool that helps you control the amount of exposure a certain version of your site has using test sites, right? So let's go to test sites and add a version. So if we go right here to Site at the top, this dropdown, and we're going to go to Create Test Site. Let's create that. So now that we have the test site created, we have it published. And now let's go to our Release Manager so we can manage and set the percentage of visitors who will see this version of our site. So we'll go to Release Manager now, and it's going to open up the Wix dashboard, right? So for all of our Wix users that are familiar with this dashboard, now there's even more tools for developers. So now you see I have two versions of my site. I have the live site and I also have the test site. So live site here, I can see the date, the time, who that's from, and I also have the exposure is 100%. And I have my test site that has 0% exposure. So the test site was what I just created and published. And I want to be able to make sure that 50% of my users are seeing this test version and 50% of my users are seeing the published version that is my final version, right? So I'm just going to go here to these three dots and I'm going to edit my exposure. Now we can edit our exposure to any percentage we like, but I'm just going to change it to 50%. So half and half. Half of my users can get a test version and half of my users can get a production version. So let's save it. And it says it's saved, and it may take a few minutes before it's in effect. But now I have two different versions of my site. All right. So I have this test version. Let's go back and edit our exposure. Let's check what that looks like. We have 50% here. So we'll see within a few minutes, if we come back to here, it's going to say that our exposure has changed to 50. And on top of that as well, I can even publish the same version. So if I feel that this test version is doing everything I needed to do, and I have got feedback from my users, and the test is running smoothly, I can fully publish and commit to this test version and have that be my new published version. So kind of think of this like version control. It's not Git, but it's kind of similar to working alongside that. So next up, outside of the release candidate, we also have monitoring tools. Right? So Wix has its own monitoring tools built in, but we also allow you to use third-party monitoring tools like Google Operations, which is formerly known as Google Stackdriver. So if we go here to logs, let's just check it out. Still within the dashboard. We can open up site events, so we can monitor right here from our own Wix logging and monitoring tools. And inside of here, you can set up and see the example exactly of how to get this started. Right? But in this lesson, we're scratching the surface and showing you where these tools are and how they can help you as a developer. Right? So these events are logged and stayed right here. And then we also have Google Operations, formerly known as Stackdriver, that you can connect to. So if you open this up, it's going to open you up to the Google Operations dashboard, and you're going to have to go follow the steps to connect your site to Google Operations. You can even connect some more third-party services as well through HTTP. Just have an endpoint, and you're able to connect to those monitoring tools as well. So we're not just keeping you within a box to just work with the Wix tools. You can work with Google Operations or maybe some other site monitoring tools that you use elsewhere. So now that you know how to use some of these tools, take what you learned from the rest of the course from creating dynamic and static event handlers and even using our front-end APIs alongside these other tools that can help you enhance your site even more. So check out our forum, our API reference, and even look at the dashboard and connect your tools to Google Stackdriver, to Wix's monitoring tools, and even something else that's third party. So I use console log a lot throughout my website so I can test out if something's working, if I'm getting the right response, or if I want to send some type of message to myself when I look at my console. Right? So our developer console is able to catch errors, it's able to tell us if something's wrong with our code, and it's also able to bring us back any messages after an event is triggered. So an event that can be triggered is actually loading the page. So let's just start here with our onReady function, and we're just going to do a simple console log and send ourselves a message on the developer console. So console.log, and in quotes, we're going to say hello, Velo. So once we go to preview mode, what you see here inside the developer console, right now it says no logs to show, but that's because we are in debug only. So if we go here to debug only, we can check out all these other options. We have our info. Looks like we're getting some more things in our console. Warnings, if there's any warnings or errors happening. And then on top of that, we get that error going. So the reason I'm not getting this console log here is because I have a backend function here that I'm actually calling right now, but I'm not using it. And it's having an error parsing this web module. So I'm gonna go back to the editor, and I'm gonna get rid of this import here. We're gonna go to preview mode once more, and we should see our log now. So notice now I see hello Velo, and I can also get another error here for a reference error, first plan is not defined. So our developer console is going to be able to tell us if anything's happening inside of our editor, right? If we have anything wrong with the code, and it can also give us messages back to us when we are logging them inside of our front end. Some of you might be familiar with Google Chrome and Google Chrome developer tools, and you can actually use debugger and set watches in order to debug your site in the way that you'd like. So you might have to do a little bit of digging when you open up the Google developer tools, but if you're familiar with it, I encourage you to go and use the Google developer tools if you're using Chrome. So that's how you use some of our internal tools and even the browser tools as well. So use that to maximize the way that you are building your site and combine all these testing methods together with creating static event handlers, dynamic event handlers, using our APIs, all the things that we've learned throughout this course. So we made it to the end of this course, and throughout our time, we've been able to do a number of things. So we first started with a simple hello world example. Then we went into learning about $W. We also created static and dynamic event handlers, and even used our own internal Wix APIs like Wix Storage, Wix Limit Window, and Wix Location. So on top of that, we've also learned how to use some of our own internal Wix developer tools. Now, with all combination with all those skills together, you should be able to make a great front-end experience with Velo by Wix. So check out our forum, check out our documentation, and our API reference if you need a refresher. We also have some other courses as well. So if you want to learn about our backend, and if you want to learn about repeaters, and even if you need a refresher, you can go and check out our Velo for Beginners course. So thanks for joining me throughout this course about Velo for Frontend, and I can see you in all the other courses. Bye.